captured Somali pirates have been handed over to Indian police. Bound and hooded, the 28 men were brought by India's Coast Guard to Mumbai.
This is the biggest pirate prison in Somalia, already home to more than 242 prisoners.
aanu aadnay shariifka ahayd waxay noo isticmaaleen awood in waxyaalo qarxa iyo hub iyo balaayo iyo nagu soo ridaan.
February 2011, a yacht was hijacked by a group of 19 Somali pirates. Now, while the pirates intended to take the yachters hostage, they were arrested by U.S. Navy SEALs. Here's a tale of 7 pirates and what happened to them in prison. Abduwali Mus,
a Somali pirate who attacked 3 ships and took a captain hostage, was sentenced in Lower Manhattan today. A judge gave him 33 years and 9 months in prison.
April 2009, 33-year-old Abduwali and 4 Somali pirates hijacked MV Maersk, Alabama, a U.S.-flagged cargo ship. As they boarded that ship, they were met with resistance and later bullets from the U.S. Navy snipers, and 3 of them were fatally shot dead on the spot. Surprisingly, Abduwali survived. But what happened to him next will change the course of his life forever. Musa was born in Galkayo, a city in Somalia that's divided by clan violence. Growing up for Musa was tough as he lived in poverty and hardship, often lacking food and clothing. To make ends meet, he had to work as a taxi assistant and a fisherman's cook. However, from Musa's perspective, these jobs were not rewarding enough, and so out of desperation and hopelessness, he became involved in piracy. He joined a group of pirates who operated from the coastal town of Il. April 8, 2009 was the day that it all came crashing down for Musa. Him and a 3-man crew stormed the Maersk, Alabama in the Indian Ocean. According to reports, he was the first to board the ship, armed with an AK-47. He met resistance from the crew who fought back. He was also stabbed in the hand by a sailor before he was eventually captured, and in a bid for peace, the crew did offer him money. But rather than accept the bargain, Musa's accomplices rejected the offer and instead took the ship's captain, Richard Phillips, as a hostage in a lifeboat. With this development, the crew decided to strike another deal with the other pirates, where Musa would be released in exchange for the captain. Unfortunately, the deal didn't go as planned, as the pirates failed to release the captain, and Musa also managed to gain his freedom and escape with his men. But just a few days later, the lifeboat was intercepted by USS Bainbridge. The Navy officers negotiated with the pirates, who were yet to reach their destination, and made them agree to let Musa come to Bainbridge to see his clan elders and free Phillips. As soon as Musa was on the ship, Navy SEAL sharpshooters immediately opened fire and shot the 3 remaining pirates dead. And so Phillips was freed, and Musa was taken into U.S. custody to stand trial. May 18, 2010, Abduwali pled guilty to hijacking, kidnapping, and hostage-taking. He also apologized to Phillips and the crew in court. Following this, he was given 33 years and 9 months in federal prison. Musa is currently serving his sentence at the Federal Correctional Institution, Terre Haute, a medium-security prison in Indiana. He's expected to be released on June 20th, 2038. While incarcerated, he was working as a prison orderly. His salary, however, is used to cover the court fee and the money he had to pay back for the hijacking. However, Abduwali wasn't always well-behaved in prison. He was once put in solitary for causing some trouble. There are, however, disturbing treatments Musa goes through as a pirate in prison. He'd lost count of the days since he was captured by the Navy and thrown into his cell. He also endures countless beatings, tortures, and humiliations from the guards and other inmates. Abduwali's currently living in hell, and his only hope of being free is still years to come. Muhammad Farah. 2010, Muhammad here was one of the pirates involved in a failed attempt to capture a U.S. Navy vessel. He was pretty lucky to be alive, as the little canoe the pirate group operated with was shot down by a deadly machine gun. 1986, Farah was born in Somalia, in a small village outside of the coastal city of Bosaso. He, alongside his 15 siblings, grew up in a war-torn country that had no central government or functioning institutions. This little boy saw violence, famine, and displacement, and had little access to education or opportunities. While his parents tried to take care of the family by keeping cattle and fish, Farah joined a group of pirates who operated with speedboats and assault rifles to attack merchant ships, oil tankers, and fishing vessels. After the attacks, they would then demand millions of dollars in ransom for their release. April 2010, Farah and his other pirate gang set out to sea in a skiff looking for a target. They spotted this large ship in the distance, and decided to approach it, mistaking it for a cargo ship in the Gulf of Aden. Little did they know, it was the USS Ashland, a U.S. Navy amphibious dock landing ship that was part of an international task force to combat piracy. The pirates fired a single shot at the ship, hoping to intimidate the crew and force them to surrender. However, that shot missed, and the USS Ashland responded by firing an Mk-38 at that skiff. The machine gun, which is capable of tearing through helicopters and armored vehicles, immediately set the skiff on fire. Farah and his crewmates stood no chance against this deadly weapon, as a bullet hit one of them and pierced him in the chest just before the lifeless body fell off into the sea. Farah was also affected by the explosion as he went in and out of consciousness. He was so disoriented that he didn't even feel his leg had been severed by the blast. His surviving crewmates, their skin charred and blistered, drag him to the surface of the water. He's gasping for air as he sees the U.S. Navy ships closing in, and as soon as they're within close range, the Navy wasted no time in rescuing the surviving pirates and immediately took him into custody. Farah and his co-defendants were brought to the U.S. to face trial, where they were charged with piracy, conspiracy, and many other offenses. Now, they pled not guilty and claimed that he and the crew were just returning from a smuggling operation from Somalia to Yemen by sea when their boats suddenly malfunctioned. This left them stuck out in the water for 7 days without food or water. However, the jury didn't believe that story and found them guilty on all counts. Farah was given 10 years plus in prison and now is currently serving his sentence in West Virginia, where he faces some pretty harsh conditions in isolation. This man has little to no contact with his family or friends in Somalia. Life in jail, however, doesn't really bother Farah much, as he says, although his number one issue is his stomach. His stomach problems make it hard for him to eat, so he relies on intravenous drip for nourishment. Each day Farah spends behind bars brings a new torment. He goes through a constant attack of cruelty from both the prison guards and other inmates, meant to make him give up and somehow pay for all his crimes. Farah's only glimmer of hope is the comfort and support he found in the Muslim community of the prison. He also found a friend in his cellmate, a Muslim from Washington, D.C., even though they have no common language. Frank Abaka, Jude Abarga, and Co.
10 pirates to 12 years imprisonment. Let's follow their conviction by Justice Ayokunle Faji on a 4-count charge of conspiracy and hijacking a Chinese fishing vessel.
July 2021, a Lagos court in Nigeria sentenced Frank Abaka and Jude Baraga, along with 8 of their accomplices, to prison for their role in the brutal kidnapping of the crew of Chinese fishing vessel Halifang 2. May 14, 2020, the Halifang 2, a Chinese fishing trawler, found itself under siege as pirates launched a ruthless assault while it navigated the exclusive economic zone of the Ivory Coast. Now, the vessel had 18 crew members on board, consisting of 8 Chinese, 7 Ghanaians, and 3 Ivorians. It didn't take long before news of the hijack went viral. This prompted several coastal cities in the Gulf of Guinea to immediately join forces to respond to the kidnapping. The maritime security frameworks set up under the Yaoundé architecture were employed to help in the rescue operation. The combined effort paid off as the Halifang 2 was intercepted by the Nigerian Navy at about 140 nautical miles south of Lagos. Only 2 days after the pirates took over the vessel, the pirates refused to surrender even though they were surrounded by the Nigerian patrol vessel, NNS Nguru, which led the intercept operation. Not backing down, this act of defiance led the Nigerian's Navy Special Boat Service to carry out an opposed boarding action while the vessel was in motion, moving at a speed of about 9 knots. It didn't take long after the Nigerian Navy boarded the vessel that Abaka, Baraga, and the other pirates were overpowered. Thankfully, all 18 hostages were still alive, and they regained their freedom. Abaka, Baraga, and their crew were then captured, and the vessel was brought safely to Lagos. The pirates were then charged with 3 counts of offenses contravening Sections 3, 10, and 12 of the Suppression of Piracy and Other Maritime Offenses Act 2019. The trial and sentencing was a major breakthrough in the battle against maritime piracy in West Africa, a region infamous as the world's hotspot for kidnappings at sea. Abaka and Baraga were found guilty of the charges and got a 12-year prison sentence per count for their crimes. According to the judge, their sentence served as a stern warning to the other criminal elements who operated with impunity from their bases in the poorly governed and economically deprived Niger River Delta. Now, in addition to that jail sentence, The court ordered the convicts to also pay $600 for each of the 3 piracy counts they faced. While in prison, Abaka, Baraga, and their cohorts faced hard times as pirates. It's no news that a form of hierarchy is formed in a prison, and those at the bottom are made to bear the brunt of the notorious leaders. This is why they're sometimes subjected to beatings by other inmates they share a cell with. Aside from this, there's also the issue of overcrowding, which stems from people being held in jail for too long before their trial. Day after agonizing day, Abaka and his crew find themselves trapped in a merciless cycle of deprivation as they have limited access to basic necessities. Their health is also slowly deteriorating due to the unhygienic food and water that they consume daily just to stay alive. Sharing cells with other people, they hardly get any privacy. And if any of these convicted pirates break the prison rules or misbehave, they might end up in solitary confinement. Mohammed Saili Shibin.
A pirate ringleader accused of murder and torture will never walk free again. Mohammed Shibin was motivated by, in his words, greed, and in nothing is more heinous than taking innocent people who have done nothing wrong. 2010,
Mohammed Shibin, a Somali pirate, hijacked the German merchant ship, Merida Margaret. He demanded ransoms of up to $5 million from the crew members he mercilessly tortured before he was arrested and handed a jail sentence never seen in the recent history of piracy. Born in the coastal town of Il, Somalia, Shibin was drawn into piracy as a means of survival in a region plagued by poverty and instability, as we already mentioned. Like many others in his community, he saw piracy as an opportunity to secure a better life through ransom payments from hijacked vessels. Shibin quickly rose through the ranks, becoming a key negotiator and facilitator for pirate gangs operating off the coast of Somalia. He would gain notoriety for his involvement in maritime piracy in the Indian Ocean. However, Shibin's success as a pirate was short-lived. In 2011, he was apprehended by U.S. authorities and charged with piracy, hostage-taking, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping. He was accused of facilitating the hijacking of the American yacht, the SV Quest, which resulted in the deaths of 4 American hostages. In addition to that, Shibin and his pirate accomplices subjected the crew members of the MV Merida Margaret to brutal torture in order to extort $5 million in 2010. Shibin's capture and subsequent trial marked a significant victory for international efforts to combat piracy in the region. 2012, Shibin was sentenced to 10 concurrent life sentences for piracy, 2 consecutive life sentences for using rocket-propelled grenades and automatic weapons during violent crimes, and along with 10 additional consecutive years for 6 counts related to firearm discharge during such crimes. That's not all. He also got another 2 20-year sentences for other counts of firearm discharge. It therefore goes without saying that Shibin is one of the few pirates to receive such a severe punishment. This comes as no surprise, as he was actively involved in 2 of the most notorious acts of piracy in recent history. Since his incarceration, Shibin has been held in a federal prison in the U.S., where he continues to serve that sentence. While reports on his treatment in prison are scarce, it can be assumed that as a convicted pirate and hostage-taker, he's likely subjected to strict security measures and monitoring. In addition to that, Shibin is struggling to cope with his situation. This man's under psychological observation for a suicide attempt. Shibin has once been reported to be frustrated by a toilet that wouldn't stop running, a noisy cellmate, and the lack of privacy. Ahmed Musa Salad, Abukar Osman Bel, and Shani Nurani Sheikh Abrar.
3 men had been found guilty of murdering 4 Americans on the yacht Quest, which was off the coast of Africa in February of 2011.
February 2011, Ahmed, Abukar, and Shani were Somali pirates who were involved in the attack against the SV Quest, a yacht that was sailing off the coast of Oman. The 3 were among 11 pirates who pled guilty to piracy and were sentenced to life in prison in the U.S. They were part of a group of pirates who hijacked the SV Quest, which was a 58 yacht owned by Scott and Jean Adam, a retired couple from California who were sailing around the world and distributing Bibles. Now, the pirates boarded the yacht and took the couple and their 2 guests, Bob Riggle and Phyllis McKay, both from Seattle, as hostages. The pirates intended to bring the Americans back to Somalia and ransom them for millions of dollars. But their plan was foiled when 4 U.S. Navy warships began following them. The Navy offered to let the pirates take the yacht in exchange for the hostages, but the pirates refused. February 22, 2011, a tense standoff ensued, during which one of the pirates fired a rocket-propelled grenade at the USS Sterett, a guided missile destroyer. According to testimony of several witnesses, the quest was immediately filled with sounds of continuous gunshots, and shattered glass was visible on its starboard side. In addition to this, Abrar was said to have fired a bullet above Scott Adams' head and ordered Adam to warn the U.S. Navy that the hostages would be killed if the military approached any further. The witnesses also identified Salah, Bell, and Abrar as the ones who fired the shots and killed Scott Adam, Gene Adam, Phyllis McKay, and Robert Riggle. When the shooting stopped, the Navy sent SEALs to the quest to secure the vessel. As soon as the three pirates and their co-conspirators saw the Navy coming on board the quest, they immediately started to surrender. Some of them were even observed throwing their AK-47s into the water as a show of surrender. The Navy successfully captured 15 pirates alive, while 4 died in a shootout. Next up, the 3 pirates would find themselves on their way to Norfolk, Virginia, to face federal charges of piracy, which carries a mandatory life sentence. Now, they were given 26 counts, including piracy, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, hostage-taking resulting in death, kidnapping resulting in death, and multiple firearms offenses. The trio knew it was over for them, and that there was no use in fighting. July 8, 2013, the 3 were found guilty of all charges against them after they pled guilty. Before their sentence was read out to them, the trio expressed their regret and sorrow for the killings. But despite their remorse, they were given a life in prison along with the other pirates who had also pled guilty. The 3 are currently serving their life sentences in a federal prison in the U.S. The fate of the trio is a contrast to the lavish lifestyle that some pirates enjoy in Somalia, where they spend their ransom money on luxury cars, houses, and drugs. When it comes down to the question of how they're treated in prison, well, let's just say it's not easy. Salah, Bell, and Abrar have to deal with a lot of horror and suffering, like language barriers, isolation, and hostility. Imagine being thrown in a prison where you don't speak their language. These guys would feel trapped and helpless in a brutal environment where they're often ignored and neglected by authorities and other inmates. Now, since they're pirates, they have no friends, no allies, and no protection. They're constantly bullied, abused, and assaulted by inmates who despise them for their religion and ethnicity. Additionally, they come from a clan-based society that's very different from the prison environment. With that, they face a different reality from most inmates. They're barred from entering the dining hall, where they can't even chat with people and share their cultural background or try to understand their situation. So Salah, Bell, and Abrar face isolation in every possible way. They have no one to talk to, and no one to comfort them. They will spend the rest of their lives alone, alienated, and miserable. Titus Azena and Michael Opuda. July 22, 2012. Titus and Michael hijacked a Chinese fishing boat, Shanghai 2, in the Sierra Leone, Liberia waters. They boarded the vessel and held the crew at gunpoint before proceeding to search them and the vessel and steal their belongings and cash. What they didn't know was that the authorities were nearby, and what started as a pirate fun-filled day quickly turned sour. These 2 men, both from Nigeria, were part of a notorious gang that terrorized the waters between Sierra Leone and Liberia in 2012. Their target was a Chinese fishing boat, the Shanghai 2, which had a crew of 23 people, including 6 Chinese nationals and 17 Sierra Leoneans. July 22, 2012. Titus and Michael, along with some other pirates whose identities remain unknown, set out on a small speedboat equipped with pistols and rifles. They spotted the Shanghai 2, which was busy with fishing operations. They would approach the vessel from behind, shooting at it indiscriminately. Now, they managed to board the boat and proceeded to intimidate and rob the crew at gunpoint. They ransacked the vessel, taking whatever valuables and cash they could find. However, the criminal act didn't go unnoticed. The Shanghai 2 had sent a distress signal, which was picked up by the Liberian Coast Guard. A patrol boat was dispatched to the scene and arrived just in time to rescue the crew and apprehend Azena and Opuda. The rest of the pirates managed to flee on their speedboat, leaving behind their 2 unlucky comrades. Now, Titus and Michael were taken to Liberia, where they faced serious charges of criminal conspiracy, piracy, armed robbery, and theft of property. They were interrogated by the Liberia National Police, who also collaborated with the Chinese and Sierra Leonean authorities to gather evidence and testimonies. After a thorough investigation, the case was brought to the Monrovia City Court at the Temple of Justice, where the two pirates were tried and convicted. August 10, 2023, the court delivered its verdict, sentencing Aina and Opuda to prison. They were transferred to the Monrovia Central Prison, where they would serve those sentences. Now, while behind bars, the two were faced with a race of survival. The prison itself, which was built to accommodate only 374 people, is severely overcrowded, with more than 1,400 prisoners. You can imagine the cells are small, dirty, and poorly ventilated, with 8 men sharing just a little space that will barely accommodate 5 people. The inmates suffer from hunger, thirst, disease, and violence. The guards neglect their duty to supply enough food and water to these inmates, who are constantly tormented by hunger and thirst. And as if that's not enough, the prison's also a breeding ground for disease, as the inmates lack access to proper sanitation and health care. And with the cramped space where all these inmates struggle to fit, contracting infections is a daily occurrence. Titus and Michael don't even know what privacy is, as they're faced daily with appalling conditions that violate basic human rights and dignity. Mohammed Abdi Hassan.
One of Somalia's most notorious pirate leaders has been captured in Belgium. Belgian police say they arrested Mohammed Abdi Hassan, also known as Big Mouth, on Monday after an undercover sting.
From 2005 to 2013, Mohammed Abdi Hassan, also known as Afwene, meaning Big Mouth in Somali, was a notorious and influential Somali pirate who terrorized the waters of the Indian Ocean and the Gulf of Aden for almost a decade. Hassan was the mastermind behind the Hobyo Haradere piracy network, a criminal organization that he founded and led. Now, during his years of crime, Hassan and his network demanded and received millions of dollars in ransom payments from the owners and governments of captured ships and their crews. In 2009, when Hassan was at the height of his power, he was revered by many as a national hero, especially by the late Libyan colonel Muammar Gaddafi, who invited him to join the 4-day celebration of the 40th anniversary of the Libyan Revolution. In 2013, Hassan announced his retirement from piracy. Despite the announcement of his retirement, Hassan was reported to still be holding some hostages at the time, who had been in captivity for years. The peace and quiet of Hassan's retirement was short-lived, as he was arrested later that year by Belgian authorities. Interestingly, he was tricked into traveling to Europe with a fake offer to make a movie about his life. After his arrest, the authorities wasted no time in extraditing him to Belgium, where he faced trial for his involvement in the hijacking of the Pompey and its crew back in 2009. Now, during the trial, he was found guilty of piracy, kidnapping, hostage-taking, and conspiracy, even though he was absent. March 2016, he was given 20 years in prison. To date, he is still the highest-ranking pirate ever captured and prosecuted by the international community. Like the other pirates on this list, life in prison is also super tough for Hassan. The language barrier makes it difficult to associate with anybody. Can't even make friends. It's also a known fact that every prison comes with its own gang, and these gangs come with benefits. For someone like Hassan who can't mingle with other inmates, that puts him in a tough spot, as non-gang members are often facing a challenging and sometimes hostile environment. Hassan is therefore subjected to bullying, intimidation, and violence from the other gangs in here asserting their dominance for prison hierarchy. Additionally, non-gang members like Hassan have to go through social isolation, which makes it really difficult to find any allies or support networks. And worst of all, he struggles to navigate the prison's informal rules and codes of conduct, which in turn leads to conflicts or misunderstandings with other inmates.